What's up, good people? Thank you for joining me on this adventure. Today's adventure is going to be an adventure in IB writing growth. You have learned enough and you know enough at this point that you know that you need to become a more confident, stronger, maybe faster writer. But you're not sure how to do it. We're going to get right down to it. IB, writing growth, and this is going to be like a volume 1. If you hear a bird, it's because I'm outside. First thing I want you to do, of course, as I draw on my paper, you're drawing on your paper. First thing you're drawing right here is a continuum with two extremes. One extreme, we have this word complexity. And on the other extreme, we have this word clarity. You may need to stop the video because you're going to do some deep thinking right now. What I want you to do is to think about yourself and your own writing. And I want you to place a dot or an X somewhere on this continuum that represents where you're at individually right now with respect to complexity on one extreme and clarity on the other. If you feel like you're super clear, you're over here. If you feel like you're super complex, you're over here. Well, now that you've done it, I'm going to let you in on a secret. This right here is a trap. If anybody ever tries to get you to locate your writing somewhere on a continuum that has complexity on one extreme and clarity on the other, don't let them do it. Do not let them do that. In fact, I'm going to write it right here. Don't get caught in the clarity, complexity trap. One of the biggest things that young writers struggle with once you get into the realm of heavy-duty analysis is the idea that your writing needs to be more complex. It's not complex enough. I'm not using enough big words. I don't have enough long, complex sentences. Which may be true if the ideas you're trying to communicate are needing that level of complexity. But complexity, if you're going to sacrifice clarity to get to complexity, it's always better to go with clarity. In fact, here's the real continuum. It's actually two. Stuck together. Two axes. And when we talk about writing and writing growth, you really need to think in terms of complexity. The opposite of complexity is not clarity. The opposite of complexity is simplicity. Clarity has its own space. It's right here, in the middle, at the top. Clarity. At the bottom, we've got just a simple word, bad writing. So if you're thinking about where you are as a writer, right here, this is where you want to be, especially if you're doing the heavy lifting, heavy mental load of like your IB type writing. It's going to be complex, but it's also going to be crystal clear. If you're struggling and you're trying to write complex because you want it to look a certain way, it might be over here. Because if it's not clear, it's bad. So throughout the course of this video, which will probably go on for another 10 minutes, 12 minutes. I'm going to be defining complexity and what are the features of complex writing. I'm going to be defining clarity, I'll be defining bad writing, and I'm going to define simplicity in writing. And each one of these have clear indicators. And so the goal, it's always good to have a goal. The goal is to learn something about how I should think about writing growth. So it's really all about how to think about it in a way that helps you, how to understand what writing growth means in a way that's going to serve your needs. Because a lot of people just go nuts over here, and then they start using verbs that they don't understand and constructing sentences that when you read them, they don't make sense. And the purpose of writing is communicating things that are sophisticated. So let's talk about some of the features that we have in complex writing. One thing that we have in complex writing is we have a certain kinds of verbs. These are the things that I look for. They're identifiers of complex writing. Complex writing, you have verbs that are specific. They're specific and they do intellectual work. So some of these types of verbs, examples of these types of verbs would be, and I always put them in the infinitive so you can tell it's a verb, to analyze, to contextualize, to reiterate, to examine. These are all verbs that do work. I'm going to say they do thinking work. We call these cognitive, action, verbs. At least I call them that. I don't know if anybody else calls them that, but it seems like an appropriate label for verbs that do the work of thinking in your writing. Another element that you'll find in complex writing is what's called domain specific vocabulary. Another word for vocabulary in this context is diction. You are selecting words that are very specific. So, for example, an example of this in action would be something like, if you're talking about a piece of writing, you're talking about how you're saying, oh, the writer keeps repeating himself, or he keeps using similar phrases. Well, if you're going to put that into writing that's complex and clear, you won't say he does the thing or she does the thing where it kind of seems to all fit together. You might talk about something that's called parallel structure. And this is, I feel like that's very spelled very wrong. You might, this word is an indicator to the reader that you are part of a discourse community that is centered around literature and literary analysis and things like that. In fact, you might use a domain-specific vocabulary word as well. And you might say that the author utilizes parallel structure, and then because you're to, this is the most important part, to what? You're always connecting. That is what analysis looks like in action. So we got some domain-specific vocabulary, diction. This next element that you'll find in complex writing there's a structure. There's a high level of structure. And structure is another word for organization. In this type of writing. So, structure, organization, and a couple of the features that go along with this structure would be length. Because you are saying things that are complex, you will need more words to say them. So you're going to have longer paragraphs. You're going to have longer sentences. And you are going to have a longer, overall, it's going to be longer. Another element of the structure is you have complex relationships. Between paragraphs. Because your paragraphs are doing specific tasks. Your paragraphs are doing work. What kind of work are they doing? Well, talk about 4 different ways that they're doing work. Sometimes your paragraphs are going to be comparing. Sometimes they're going to be supporting claims. With evidence. Sometimes they're going to be examining implications. Sometimes they're going to be examining complications. So since they're doing complex work and they're in succession, there's going to be relationships between paragraphs. And that brings us to 4th element, which is complex syntax. So, complex syntax exists. Well, what is it? Well, it means you're going to have different kinds of sentences. You're going to have sentences that are simple. You're going to have sentences that are compound. And you're going to have sentences that are complex. You're also going to have transitions between sentences. BTW sentences. Transitions between sentences, sometimes within sentences that do some of this work over here. So if you're supporting claims and comparing, you're going to have transitions to let the reader know when you're moving on from one claim to another, when you're introducing a new claim. So you have all of these elements of complexity. And here's the kicker. Bad writing is going to have grammar mistakes. And clear writing is free of grammar errors. Because like the stakes are higher in these types of sentences, you're asking the sentence to do more. You're asking the reader to do more because you're not, you're examining things that are complex. Well, you have to have grammar that really supports simple sentences, compound sentences, complex sentences. Each of those has its own very well understood rules of how you can build those sentences and what commas do and what they can't do and things like that. And so if you're fluent in that, your writing will be free of grammar errors, and you will be able to be right here where you want to be. If you're going for it, you're trying to be complex, but there's so many grammar mistakes in the way that you're negotiating these complex tasks, well, then your writing is going to be, you're going for complexity, but it's going to end up bad writing because it's not going to be clear, because mistakes make the reader's job very difficult. The other thing you're going to have with clarity is your writing will exude, I'm just going to write exude confidence. So you're not making any grammar errors, but you're also not afraid to use the different types of sentences to communicate ideas that are complicated. You will also have, if your writing is clear, something that is called cohesion. Very important. Cohesion, I define as a situation when each word or phrase, or sentence or paragraph, each word, sentence, paragraph, phrase has a vital role in overall meaning. Clear writing has cohesion. It means it sticks together. It sticks together very well. And then here's something that maybe you can fake. And you should definitely try to fake it if you need to. I'm going to come right over here because I think there's space to write. Right here is that the reader will be able to feel the writer's interest in the subject. If you have clarity, simplicity is not bad. Notice that simplicity is not bad writing. In fact, geniuses are able to take things that are incredibly complex and state them with clarity and simplicity. That's pretty special to be able to do that. So your job is to make your writing as clear as possible, and in some cases as simple as possible. But the work that's over here, you can tell, is a lot. It's a heavy lift. So simplicity uses simple syntax. I'll say simpler syntax. It's going to have probably more passive verbs. It's going to be shorter. And we're at 19 minutes. I think I'll probably finish up here in the last minute with a big overarching statement, conclusion, something to take away from all of this is that however you're going to grow as a writer, it's important to realize that when we talk about complex writing, the purpose of complex writing ultimately is to invite the reader into a complex thought process. Complex thought process about something that matters. So this phrase right here, something that matters, is huge. If you don't feel that what you're writing about matters, your reader is going to feel that, and they're not going to be willing to go along for the ride. And it should be a ride, and you should be a gentle and caring guide. Imagine taking something as complex as this and transforming it into a series of paragraphs. How careful you have to be in your organization, in your logic, in connecting ideas and explaining how they fit together. That ultimately is what writing is for. Have a wonderful day.